She was banned from WWE. No one thought she'd ever appear again, but when her theme hit, the cameras couldn't even capture the chaos that followed. This wasn't just a return, it was a rebellion. To understand the earthquake, you must first understand the silence that came before it. For 3 years, the name Kaylen Vance was a ghost that haunted every arena. She was the unspoken truth, the missing piece of a puzzle the company had tried to throw away. Fans whispered her name in online forums, creating fantasy scenarios for a return that felt more like a prayer than a prediction. On television, however, she simply ceased to exist. Her matches were scrubbed from the archives, her name never mentioned by the commentary team. She was a phenom, the daughter of a legend, erased from history for a crime the company never dared to name, speaking truth to power. Tonight was supposed to be a coronation, the final scene of a carefully crafted story. The company's chosen champion, a corporate-approved, polished product, stood in the ring, gold shimmering under the lights. The executive behind his push, Silas Thorne, watched from his skybox, a smug smile playing on his lips. Everything was going according to plan. The show was predictable, safe, and profitable. The fans had cheered, they had booed, and now they were settling in for the final, familiar shot of a champion raising their title as confetti fell from the rafters. The arena was loud, but it was a controlled noise, a manufactured excitement. No one knew that the silence was about to be broken, and the carefully built walls of this kingdom were about to come crashing down in the most spectacular way imaginable. It started not with a bang, but with a single, haunting electric guitar chord that sliced through the celebratory music in the arena. It was an alien sound, a note of defiance that didn't belong. For a split second, there was only confusion. The crowd murmured, looking around, thinking it was a production error. The champion in the ring lowered his title, a puzzled look on his face. The commentators fumbled with their headsets, their pre-written sign-offs dissolving on their tongues. Then, a second chord hit, followed by a drum beat so familiar, so deeply buried in the collective memory of the fans, that the confusion didn't turn to realization. It exploded into it. The sound was an old ghost returning to life. It was Kaylen Vance's theme. The reaction wasn't a cheer, it was a physical detonation of sound. A roar of disbelief and vindication erupted from 20,000 people at once. The floor of the arena seemed to shake. Grown men who had followed her career from the beginning were on their feet, hands on their heads, their faces a mixture of shock and joy. Teenagers who had only heard the legends were recording on their phones, their hands trembling, desperate to capture a moment that felt impossible. The television cameras, programmed to follow the champion, swiveled wildly, trying to find the source of the eruption. They panned across a sea of faces, faces contorted in pure, unscripted emotion. This wasn't the manufactured excitement from moments before. This was raw, untamable chaos. This was hope, returned in the form of a forgotten song. Backstage, the ordered world of production had descended into panic. No one knew what was happening. Then she appeared, emerging from the entrance tunnel, cloaked in shadow, before stepping into the light. Kaylen Vance. She looked different. The flashy ring gear was gone, replaced by simple black jeans and a leather jacket. There was no pyrotechnics, no smoke, no grand theatrical entrance. There was only her. Her expression wasn't one of triumphant joy or vengeful anger. It was calm, centered, and radiating an intensity that burned brighter than any stage light. She paused at the top of the ramp, letting the tidal wave of noise wash over her. But she wasn't basking in it. She was absorbing it, channeling it. Every cheer was a testament to 3 years of fan frustration, 3 years of refusing to forget. Her eyes scanned the crowd, but they didn't seem to be looking for a specific person. It felt like she was looking at every single one of them, making a silent promise. Her walk to the ring was agonizingly slow, each step a deliberate act of defiance. The security team, stationed at the barricade, turned from the crowd to face her, their faces etched with confusion. Their earpieces were silent. There were no orders. They were trained for every contingency except the impossible. They stood frozen, helpless, as she walked right past them, her presence a force they dared not touch. This wasn't part of the show. This was a breach. In the corporate box, Silas Thorne was on his feet, his face pale, his mask of control shattered. He was screaming into a phone, but down on the arena floor, no one could hear him. The only sound was the roar of the crowd and the steady, determined rhythm of Kalen Vance's boots on the steel ramp. When Kalen slipped under the bottom rope and into the ring, a strange hush fell over the immediate chaos. The champion, who had been the center of this universe just minutes before, now looked like a forgotten statue, a prop in a drama that was no longer his. He took a hesitant step back, holding his championship belt more like a shield than a trophy. Kalen paid him no attention. Her focus was entirely elsewhere. Someone from ringside slid a microphone into the ring, an instinctual act from a crew member running on autopilot. She bent down, her movements fluid and unhurried, and picked it up. The arena held its breath. 20,000 people, and millions watching at home, leaned in, desperate to hear the words she had been silenced from saying for 3 long years. What would she say? Would she unleash a tirade against the company? Would she challenge the champion? She raised the microphone to her lips. The silence in the building was now absolute, a vacuum of anticipation. Her eyes, however, weren't looking at the crowd. They were aimed higher, past the lights and the rafters, directly at the glass-fronted skybox where Silas Thorne stood watching, his face a portrait of fury. She held his gaze for a long, pregnant moment. A silent conversation passed between them, an entire war fought in a single stare. Then, without saying a single word, she let the microphone fall from her hand. It hit the canvas with a heavy, amplified thud that echoed like a gunshot through the arena. The message was clear. Her time for talking was over. This was the beginning of her action. And as Thorne slammed his fist against the glass, the screen faded to black, ending the broadcast and leaving the world to wonder what came next. The moment the broadcast ended, the real storm began. The internet didn't just buzz, it fractured. Kalen Vance was the #1 trend worldwide in under 2 minutes, surpassing global news and celebrity scandals. It was a digital wildfire, spreading faster than any PR team could hope to contain. Every social media platform became a forum for frantic speculation. Fans uploaded shaky phone footage of her entrance, analyzing her expression, her walk, her wordless statement. The dropped microphone became an instant, iconic symbol of rebellion, photoshopped into historical images of protest and defiance. Old interviews where a younger Kalen spoke passionately about honor and the legacy of the business were unearthed and went viral all over again. Her words from the past gave context to her actions in the present, painting a picture of an exile who had never lost her convictions. Wrestling journalists and mainstream sports media alike were in a state of pandemonium. Sources were called, texts were sent, but the company was a black hole of information. The official corporate social media accounts posted nothing, their silence a deafening admission that they had lost control of the narrative. For the first time in a long time, the story wasn't being written by the company, it was being written by the fans. And their story was one of a returning hero, a rogue agent who had infiltrated the system to reclaim her honor. Every hour the company stayed silent, the legend of Kalen Vance grew. She was no longer just a banned wrestler. She was an idea, a symbol of hope for anyone who felt silenced by a faceless corporate machine. The world was watching, not to see a wrestling match, but to witness a revolution. If the outside world was a wildfire, the backstage area was the epicenter of the earthquake. The moment the cameras stopped rolling, the carefully maintained facade of professional harmony crumbled. An invisible line was drawn down the middle of the locker room. On one side were the younger, hungrier talents who saw Kalen's return as a heroic act. They spoke in hushed, excited tones, electrified by the idea that someone had finally stood up to the oppressive authority of executives like Silas Thorne. To them, she wasn't a threat, she was a savior. On the other side were the established veterans, the ones with comfortable contracts and prominent positions. They saw her as a loose cannon, a destabilizing force that threatened their security. They saw her actions as selfish, putting the entire company and their livelihoods at risk. Friendships frayed in an instant. Arguments broke out in hushed corners. Loyalty, once a simple matter of signing a paycheck, was now a complex personal question. Meanwhile, Silas Thorne's office was a war room. His rage had subsided into a cold, focused fury. He yelled at security for the breach, at production for not cutting the feed sooner, at his legal team for answers they didn't have. But beneath his anger was a palpable sense of fear. He had built his career on order, on control, on the principle that the machine was more powerful than any individual part. Kaylin Vance, with one walk and one dropped microphone, had proven him wrong. She had revealed the cracks in his fortress, and now he could feel the entire structure beginning to groan under the pressure. The house he ruled was now hopelessly divided. Miles away, in a quiet home filled with championship belts and framed photographs, a legend sat watching the chaos unfold on his television. Marcus the Titan Vance, Kaylin's father, was a man carved from the very bedrock of the company. He was a Hall of Famer, a first-ballot icon who had built his legacy on three principles: work hard, respect the business, and above all, be loyal to the company that made you. He had watched his daughter's banishment with a broken heart, torn between his love for her and his allegiance to the institution that defined his life. He had advised her to stay quiet, to apologize, to play the game so she could one day return to the life she was born for. She had refused, and their relationship had been strained ever since, a quiet casualty of her exile. Now, watching her defiant return, he felt a dizzying mix of terror and pride. The father in him swelled with admiration for her courage, for the unwavering strength he knew she possessed. But the company man, the Titan, was terrified. She hadn't just defied an executive, she had declared war on the entire system, the very system that had provided for their family, the system he had dedicated his life to upholding. He picked up his phone, his hand trembling slightly, and dialed her number. When she answered, he didn't yell. His voice was heavy with the weight of his legacy. He didn't ask why she did it. He asked a question that was far more painful. "Do you know what you've done to our name?" It wasn't an accusation, but a plea from a man watching his world, and his daughters, spin dangerously out of control. To understand Kaylin's return, you have to understand the 3 years she spent in the wilderness. The banishment wasn't a vacation, it was a slow, grinding process of erasure. At first, the calls from friends in the business were frequent, full of support and promises to speak up. But as weeks turned into months, the calls dwindled. People had careers to protect, families to feed. Speaking up for Kaylin Vance became a liability. Soon, the silence from her former life was as complete as her absence from television. She took odd jobs, coached local aspiring wrestlers in a dusty gym, and fought a quiet, daily battle against bitterness. There were offers from rival promotions, lucrative deals that could have put her back in the spotlight, but she turned them all down. To her, this was never about wrestling for another company. It was about the principle of the matter within her own home. There were dark nights when doubt crept in. Was one principle worth her entire career, worth the dream she'd had since she was a little girl watching her father from the side of the ring? She would look at the stack of documents she had collected, the evidence of the corruption she had witnessed, and the doubt would recede. Her fight wasn't just for herself. It was for every wrestler who was ever told to stay silent, to just be grateful they had a job. Her return wasn't an impulsive act of rebellion. It was the final, calculated move in a war she had been fighting alone, in the dark, for 1,095 days. It was the price she was willing to pay, not just to reclaim her career, but to reclaim the soul of the business her father had taught her to love. While the public and the locker room saw chaos, the company's board of directors saw something else entirely: data. In the 72 hours following Kaylin's return, the numbers told a story that was impossible to ignore. Online merchandise stores had sold out of her old, discontinued t-shirts, forcing the company to hastily restock them. The stock price, after an initial dip from the uncertainty, had rebounded and surged to a yearly high. Engagement on their digital platforms had shattered every existing record. The segment of the show featuring her return was the most watched minute of wrestling programming in over a decade. The board members weren't wrestling purists. They were investors. And they saw Kalen Vance not as a problem, but as an untapped explosive asset. Their gaze then turned to Silas Thorne. For years, they had seen him as a brilliant operator, a man who kept the talent in line and the product moving smoothly. But the data now painted him as a liability. He had taken one of their most popular potential stars, a legacy talent with a built-in fan base, and turned her into an enemy of the company. He had created a martyr. The fan backlash against him personally was immense, and the board recognized that the audience now had a clear hero and a clear villain. In the cold, calculated world of corporate governance, the choice was simple. The rebellion wasn't just happening in the ring or on social media. It had reached the one place Silas Thorne believed he was untouchable, the boardroom. His control was an illusion, and the real power was about to make its move. The following week, the company's flagship show opened not with explosions and rock music, but with the company's CEO standing in the middle of the ring, wearing a somber suit. He spoke of tradition, of legacy, and of listening to the audience. He announced a full, independent investigation into the conduct of the talent relations department. He announced that Silas Thorne had been suspended indefinitely. And then, he said the words the world was waiting to hear. Kalen Vance is hereby officially reinstated. The arena erupted, a cathartic release of a week's worth of tension. But just as the celebration reached its peak, the arena lights dimmed and the Titantron flickered to life. It was Kalen, not in the arena, but on a pre-recorded video filmed in a simple, unadorned room. She looked into the camera, a small, knowing smile on her face. "Thank you," she began. "Thank you for your support. Thank you for never forgetting. I'm grateful for my reinstatement, but I'm not accepting it." A stunned silence fell over the arena. "My return," she continued, "was never about getting my job back. It was never about a championship. It was about finishing what I started 3 years ago." She reached off screen and held up a thick bound folder. "This is evidence," she said, her voice steady and clear. "Evidence of contract tampering, of safety violations, of a system of intimidation, all orchestrated by the man who was just suspended. I needed a platform big enough that they couldn't ignore it. You gave me that platform." The camera zoomed in on her face. "I'm not coming back to be a wrestler," she concluded. "I'm coming back to help rebuild. My rebellion wasn't about entering the ring again. It was about making sure that when I'm gone, the ring is a better place for everyone who steps into it." The screen went black, leaving an entire industry contemplating a shocking truth. The comeback wasn't the story. It was just the beginning.